to hear the story, Carmen. Frank peered intently at the tiny pile of grey dust gathering on the table in front of him. Frank, I've told it 3 times this week. Carmen looked up from her notes, her brows suddenly furrowing. What are you doing? Frank was scraping with his penknife at 2 sticks of black and white chalk. I found these near the drawings on the footpath, he said. I thought the lost colours might be inside. Carmen sighed. Surely the coloured chalks had been stolen, and black and white ones left behind. That had been her assumption. What Frank was suggesting was that the thief had stolen the colour itself. A startling idea, but Carmen knew well enough not to ignore Frank's intuitions. There seemed to be forces at work in this case, a powerful sense of something that sent a shiver down her spine. Frank continued his scraping unperturbed. Tell me the story, Carmen. Carmen sighed again. There was no arguing with Frank. In the beginning there was a bang, or so it said, and energy and matter began to spread outwards from the source of this extraordinary explosion. As that energy and matter spread, particles were attracted to one another in various ways and began to coalesce, forming into bodies of various kinds which continued to expand outward in relation to one another. These bodies in turn attracted or repelled each other, coalescing and forming alliances in this expanding universe. Gases, burning stars, planets, asteroids, and on these bodies other bodies formed, and on it went. Eventually, as we know, one of these coalescings resulted in our ancestral selves. On we wandered for some hundreds of thousands of years, growing and developing in relation to everything we encountered as we traversed the landscape of our world. Many important changes happened during this expanse of time, many changes. If we described even a few of them in a fashion that did them justice, this story would become way too long to tell. To get to the nub of things, we need to jump ahead a little to the time when our ancestral human selves developed what some now call extended consciousness. At this point, crucial point in our human story, the ancestors of you and me have developed biologically and awakened. We are now differentiated, separated from our brethren and aware of self, our bodies in relation to the universe. What was it that we were doing, needing, moving towards, that we required that new faculty? What was happening in the world and in the cosmos? What, if anything, might the world have needed of us? This was a point in Carmen's story where in the past many listeners had begun scowling at her and adjusting their posture to alleviate some mysterious discomfort. She glanced at Frank and was relieved to see that he seemed quite relaxed. Along with this awareness of the self has come the knowledge of the enormity of the universe, our stature within it, our relation to it, our vulnerability and our mortality. Along with that burden of knowledge, we have become conscious of our consciousness, our capacity for thought, and our capacity to observe our own emotions and thought processes in action. We know we are alive, we know we are awake, we know we think, we know there is the potential for pleasure and for pain, and we know that we will die. In all this we are alone. For the first time, not part of an organic communal whole, but a separate entity. No other being can know about directly or share what is happening within our bodies, within our minds. Experiences, thoughts, emotions, feelings, flooding through our bodies, separated for all time from others. How could we possibly live with that? Well, we couldn't, could we, without some help? Extended consciousness would have no purpose whatsoever other than as an endless torture if we simply had to live with that. Awake to ourselves, but with as yet no means at our disposal to share that knowledge with each other. Something had to happen to make it possible not only to live with this extra slice of knowing, but to use it to help us flourish. Things have changed. We have changed somehow from being merely conscious animals aware of our surroundings, our spatiality, and our belongingness within a species. Before the change, we recognized our own as indivisible, our bodies part of a collective whole, feeling the hunger in our bellies, the drive for sex, the need for warmth and comfort, probably the need for love, relief from primal fear and pain, and responded to satisfy those feelings as they rose within us, experienced them as they were, as corporeal necessities, as paramount objectives. We nevertheless recognise this within the context of the pack, the herd, the tribe, as though we were its nose, its rump, its foot, its skin, and it was ours. Not only that, what was without also was within. The universe itself, the earth, the sky, the sea, the air we breathed. We felt it, smelt it, were it. Slept and ate and worked and ran and mated within that collective space of our belonging. And then, for some inexplicable reason, something happened in our being and we woke up. We turned around and we were other than the rest, no longer joined one unto the other, and so to all. We had undergone the terrible mental severing from ourselves. Poor us, how awful! Now what are we to do? Hunger is no longer simply hunger, but is added to our memory of the severing and magnified by the knowledge of what it means to lack, that the absence of food and shelter and sex and comfort equals death. And death now is a frightening thing, the severing, eternal. Therefore, hunger equals pain, pain and loss and insecurity. We can still go out and search for food to still our hunger pangs or satisfy our thirst, or find a mate and die the little death, but we search aware that we might fail, and that our failure might mean the end for us. Here we are then, wandering in the wilderness of selfhood. What comes to us as we are wandering in this wilderness of thoughts, feeling lonely and uncertain for the first time in our existence? What happens as we go about our business, casting sidelong glances at our fellows, wondering what is happening inside their bodies and in their heads? What feelings plague them, and if their feelings and anxieties and fears bear any resemblance whatsoever to our own? What happens is that we begin to want to share these troubling thoughts and feelings that are plaguing us. We could point to where the pain is, to where the feelings are, and moan a little or a lot. Press a fist into our stomachs, or put our head into our hands and weep. Not enough, though, is it, to share the feeling of how terrible it is to know. If only there was something out here in the world that was like enough to show, to let another see what was happening inside. Let the show go on, we say, the showing of the like enough, the as if it were, that will help us understand each other. We are thinking with whatever images we can muster. This is the only way. And we are heartened by that thought. All of a sudden, the burden feels a little lighter. We are comforted, excited even, by the idea that the like enoughs and the as if it were's can really help us to explain all this that we have carried on our own. How energizing, how uplifting. So we set about with all our might to search them out, these things that symbolize these communicable images, to search them out and pin them down, to bed them in, to bring them into being, and then to make them work for us, to have them universalized amongst us, recognized, the sounds, the movements, the images that bring out amongst us all those things that could otherwise not be shared. But hold on, what was it that allowed us to pull together all these symbols, to make meanings to be shared, to put one mark beside another, one movement of our bodies with another, to make pictures of ideas, a visual language, or combine one sound with another in an endlessly evolving patterning of spoken language? The chalks, Frank answers emphatically. All the coloured chalks. He pauses, smudging a streak of grey across his upper lip. Carmen, do you think? Could the universe just be God thinking? Carmen knew Frank wouldn't expect an answer.